Thank you for having me. The office is actually the Office of Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. And a lot of folks, when they hear that, Consumer Affairs, they automatically think the Attorney General's office. That's a big part of what we do, but they're a separate state entity. Have a number of agencies under our wing, if you will. We have 5 divisions, including our own specific mandate. We oversee the Division of Insurance. The Division of Insurance is responsible for regulating healthcare, property insurance, auto insurance, amongst other things. They have a consumer protection line. We have the Division of Banks. The Division of Banks oversees 200 state-chartered credit unions as well as banks in Massachusetts with a combined total asset of $400 billion. In addition to that, they oversee and regulate debt collectors, mortgage loan, as well as brokers. We have the Division of Standards, which I'll talk more about their mandate in a moment, but basically they're responsible for going out inspecting fuel pumps. When you go and you pump your gas, you'll see a sticker there. That's either been placed on by a local inspector or one of our state inspectors. Our towns, if they have over 5,000 residents, can contract with us and we will actually inspect the pumps. A lot of towns feel it's economically better to go with us than to hire someone full-time to do it. So they inspect the fuel pumps, and one of the things that they've been finding out these days is that they've been locating skimming devices. In addition to that, they inspect price scanners. They license auto body repair shops as well. We have the Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which regulates the telecommunications and cable industry. And lastly, we have the Division of Professional Licensure, which licenses over 375,000 tradespeople, from electricians to plumbers to chiropractors to psychologists, amongst other things. And they're responsible for licensing as well as disciplining anyone or taking complaints for consumers. And then we have our own mandate. We have a pretty broad mandate within the Office of Consumer Affairs. We oversee the do not call list. So if you have been a victim of a lot of sales calls, you can call our office and be placed on the do not call list, as well as with the federal entities. We have the data breach, which is a huge issue out there. It requires any business or entity that holds personal information of a consumer, that information's breached. They're required to notify our office the nature of the breach, how many Massachusetts residents have been impacted by it, as well as what they're doing to rectify it. And that list is sent to us along with the Attorney General's office. We have the Lemon Law arbitration program. So if you've been aggrieved by purchasing a new or pre-owned vehicle, you can apply towards our arbitration program. And one of our most important programs is our home improvement contracting program. Basically, it requires any contractor who is doing home improvement work in Massachusetts to register with our office. They register and they pay a one-time fee into the guarantee fund. Which we have a complaint process, so if you've been aggrieved by having some home improvement contracting, you can file a complaint with our office. And our office has hearing officers, former prosecutors, who will hear the matter, and they can either dismiss the matter if they don't think there's a basis for it. They can fine the contractor, they can suspend the contractor, or they can revoke their registration. A number of complaints that our investigators are looking into, one of which involved a homeowner in the Boston area that paid thousands of dollars to renovate her home. She was having a family member come live with them. They were supposed to expand the second floor. They took the roof off, they took the deposit, and then they took off. And this woman has been without a roof for the past 2 months. So we're working with the local authorities to investigate and prosecute this individual. And the reason why we advise consumers to make sure that the contractor is registered is that if you've been aggrieved by the process, Provided you meet the criteria, you can file with a guarantee fund and recoup up to $10,000 from the trust fund that we oversee. Some contractors will advise the homeowner, why don't you go pull the permit? If you do that, it negates your ability to access the guarantee fund, and it should raise a red flag as to why they want you, the homeowner, pulling the permit. So we advised homeowners to go on our website, call our office if you have any questions. And that leads me to the last mandate, which is we have a consumer hotline. We have 4 students from Northeastern that man the phones from 9 to 5 every day, and they take hundreds of calls from consumers across Massachusetts. And one of the things that the number of calls that they take are on scams that are going out there, as well as identity theft. You know, I started my career as a prosecutor, actually here in Worcester County. And back in the day, as a young prosecutor, identity theft consisted of someone losing their wallet and then having your personal information out there. Now folks don't even have to leave their home. They can be halfway across the world and they can compromise your personal information. I'd like to say to folks out there, it's not a question as to whether or not we're all going to be victims of identity theft. That's a given. What the question is when it's going to happen and how often it's going to happen. One interviewer said to me, you know, how can I protect myself? I mean, how can I guarantee that I won't be a victim of identity theft? And I said, go back to the dark ages. Use cash. Don't go on a computer. Don't put your personal information out there. If you have a computer and you have a password, you should use a password that is not easily identifiable with you. And you should mix it up. A lot of companies require both numbers as well as letters, uppercase, lowercase, and in most businesses, they require you to change it periodically. Recently, I got an email from my brother who lives in Europe, and he said, you need to change your password. Your system's been hacked. Basically, people will go out and go through your trash, and it's amazing what people will do. They'll throw tax returns, they'll throw bills out with your personal information, and these folks will literally go through your trash and get your Social Security number, and off they go. So we advise consumers to invest in a paper shredder. One of the main types of ways in which they're compromising our personal information is through skimmers. They're going into gas stations in the dead of night, and they're putting skimming devices inside the machine. And basically, they access it by means of Bluetooth, because back in the day when we were first discovering them, the proprietor would call the local police, who would call the FBI, and they would set up surveillance waiting for them to show up. Now they download it via Bluetooth. They leave the device in there. That's the cost of doing business. And what they'll do is they'll put the device in, you'll put your credit card in the slot, and it will download your personal information. They're using the skimming devices in gas pumps. They're also using them on ATM machines. Our Division of Banks has been involved with the local and the state authorities. We've had several of them. One was up in down in the South Shore around Christmas time. Basically what they do is they pull the facade off and they put the device in. And they become very sophisticated. What they'll do is they'll mount a camera on the side, a lot of times where there'll be deposit slips or what have you. And what that'll do is it'll capture your PIN number, and then the device will capture your personal information. Again, you should be cognizant of that fact. If you go to a gas pump, there'll be a sticker. If that sticker's been compromised, you should notify the proprietor. We recently had a situation down in Providence, Rhode Island. A correctional officer was attending a concert with his wife and noticed that the facade on the ATM machine was slightly ajar, and he pulled it back, and lo and behold, there was a skimming device in there. We don't advise consumers to do that because there's a lot of potential forensic evidence, but you should notify the bank, and they will notify the FBI and the Secret Service. We're finding skimming devices in department stores. They'll put the skimming device in there, and I just learned the other day from a member of my staff, they have shimmers. Shimmers are these little devices that actually go into the slot where you put your credit card, and it downloads that information. In addition to that, they have handheld skimming devices. We're seeing them at airports, bus terminals, malls, train stations. What they'll do is they'll rub up against you, your wallet, your purse, and they'll download all your personal information on that. They'll even go after your passport. Since 2007, there's a chip in your passport with all your personal information. They'll rub up against that and download your personal information. So we've come out with these protective sleeves. You can get them online. Basically, you put your credit cards in there, and it protects your cards from being compromised. In addition to that, the banking industry just came out with the chip and PIN. I'm sure you've seen it on your credit card. They'll say actually enter your chip. Basically, what that does is it protects your personal information. And all entities are required to have that. If they don't, they become liable should the information be compromised. Ransomware is basically, you go on a website, and it could be infected with malware. And what they'll do is there are groups out there that will get into your system, and they'll freeze all your information. And then they'll send you an email, and they'll say, in order to get access to your information, your documents, your pictures of your family or whatnot, you need to send $500, $2,000 to this wire or do it PayPal. And if you don't, we're going to delete all your information. And there was a woman in New York who we learned about who was a victim of this, and they said you needed to have $500 sent by way of this route, if you will. And she was trying to gather the money. It was before Christmas, and she was only able to come up with $480. And so she contacted them and said, "Can you give me another day?" Believe it or not, they gave her another day. She came up with so I guess some of them do have a bit of a heart after they took her $500. But it's not only private citizens who have been victimized by this ransomware, it's police departments, it's hospitals, it's businesses. I have a former colleague who's the chief of police out here in Central Mass, and he told me that their department was a victim of ransomware. He brought in an expert from the IT department who was going to go in and fix it. It was going to cost them thousands of dollars versus pay the ransomware, which was $5,000. They chose to pay the ransomware. And that tied up all police reports, all their documents for at least a week. So, you know, we advise consumers, be cognizant of what sites you go on, because they'll go into these obscure sites and they'll put their malware on there, and then the next thing you know, your system's frozen, and in order to unfreeze it, you have to pay a ransom. So one of the biggest scams that we see that's been around for years is the IRS scam. You're all familiar with the IRS scam?
I've got one. I'm a target, I guess.
Well,
I think other people in the room probably, you owe X number of dollars and you're going to have to call.
Yeah, or you need to wire $10,000. There's a group operating out of Seattle, Washington, and New York, upstate New York, and they're very persistent and aggressive. They will call you. It sounds professional. The Internal Revenue Service, you owe X amount of dollars in back taxes. In order for not to be criminally prosecuted, you need to contact this number. And believe it or not, we have folks that do that. You know, they will call them, and you know, what we tell the consumers, first off, the Internal Revenue Service doesn't operate that way. They don't call you. If in doubt, call the Andover office and reach out to them. But that's not how the IRS operates. In addition to the IRS scam, we got the fake lottery scam that I'm sure you've all heard of. You know, you've won $1 million. All you need to do is pay the taxes. The Boston Globe did a series about 6 months ago focusing on these fake lottery scams. And there was one individual who had actually received 3 different notifications that he had won a lottery. And then he received a 4th one. And the 4th one said, listen, we're aware of the fact that you just have been awarded 3 lottery awards, if you will, under federal law, you can't collect more than one in a given calendar year unless you join our association. This guy ended up spending over $100,000 and was scammed. So if it's too good to be true, it probably is. The other one we're seeing quite a bit of is the grandparent scam or the grandmother scam. Basically what they'll do is they'll go on social media, Facebook and all the other social networks, and it's amazing the information people put out there. Pictures of their grandkids, where they're going to school, who their friends are, and they'll Google it, they'll do the information, and they'll call the individual in the middle of the night. They'll find out, for instance, recently one of my colleagues' mother-in-law who lives in Texas, who has a grandson who's studying at Atlanta, Georgia, received this call and said, your grandson's been detained. You need to send $2,000 in order for him to post bond. And she panicked. The first thing in the morning, she went down to a Western Union. The individual behind the counter, the Division of Banks works to train them to spot these scams, and he said, ma'am, I'd like to take your money, but this is a scam. She promptly left there, went to another business, not as reputable as Western Union. The guy took the money, and she was out $2,000. They'll find that your niece or nephew or your granddaughter's doing a study abroad in Paris. All that information is out there, and it's just a matter of time before they get that. Lastly, one of the things that we've come across is the one-ring scam. My cell phone rang, they let it ring once, and they hung up. Like anyone, you see a missed call, if you don't recognize it, you call it back. It's a group operating out of the Caribbean, and what they'll do is you call back, they'll keep you on the line, and they'll ring up a huge bill. Recently, our students told me that they have a group purporting to be with the Department of Unemployment Assistance, which provides workers unemployment benefits for workers in Massachusetts. And they will target individuals who are either collecting workers' comp or have applied for benefits. And they'll say, you need to contact us, and they'll get you on the phone. They'll say, we need additional information. They'll get your date of birth, social security number, and then you won't hear back from them until they've compromised your information. What we advise consumers to do if you've been a victim of identity theft, the business, if it goes through a business, is required to notify you. Recently, this past year, I was notified by my mortgage lender that my information had been compromised. In the same week, I read an article in the Boston Globe about how the Office of Personnel Management, which oversees hundreds of thousands of current and former federal employees, that their system been hacked. 24 million current and former federal employees. I worked in one of the Bush administrations. My information had been hacked. So in 1 week, they got it through the federal system, and they got it through my mortgage company. What we advise consumers to do if you've been a victim of identity theft, you can put a freeze on your credit report. You can request, by law, they're required to give you one credit report per year. Review those. If things show up on that are not you, then you need to challenge that. Recently, my wife and I were having some work done with a contractor, and the woman who was taking the information learned the office I was with, and she said, recently I went to refinance on my home, and they pulled my credit report, and I found out that someone had gotten my personal information, had purchased a condominium in her name, had leased a brand new vehicle in her name, and she wasn't even aware of that. Nor would she be made aware of it until they started defaulting on the payments, and then they were going to come back to her. So review your credit reports, review your bank statements, either online or the paper documents. What we found with these skimming devices is what they'll do is if they compromise your information, they'll send it out, and they'll tweak it to make sure it's a live account. You'll see a purchase for $5 and then $10, and then they're withdrawing $500. So they start small and they go big. And, you know, they figure they have a short window of opportunity to access your funds. And so they're going to start small, and within a week, they're going to progress up to $500, $1,000 on Amazon, $1,500 on this, and that's how they work. So review your bank statements at least on a monthly basis, and invest in paper shredders. Protect your password. They're even becoming very brazen in terms of corporate America. This is something I've heard over and over from banks as well as corporations. A member of payroll or a member of accounting department in a large company receives an email from what is purported to be the CEO saying you need to wire X amount of dollars to this company. And it's the CEO. Who am I as a low-level employee to question that? And they'll wire funds. We had that recently with banks. The bank employee received an email from the bank president saying you need to wire $1.5 million to China. And they had done a lot of work overseas, so it wasn't unusual. So she didn't question it, and lo and behold, it turned out that it was a fraudulent email. Wow. So again, they're finding, as soon as we identify and put the word out that they're out there scamming individuals, they find another way to victimize people. So we oversee the do not call list along with the federal government. And what we tell consumers, if they're trying to scam you and embezzle money and extort money out of you, they're not going to abide by a do not call list. They're not going to say, oh, this person doesn't want to be bothered, I'm not going to try to rip them off. You know, I mean, that's the reality of the situation. One of the best ways to protect yourself is invest in an answering machine. They hate that. They don't get a live person. You know, I about 6 months ago, I received 3 or 4 calls from the IRS in the course of 24 hours. And you could see that they were getting aggravated because they couldn't reach me. And
one where I got a call last year from a medical device company saying your primary care doctor has asked us to call you because you need a back brace.
mm-hmm.
I believe that's what it was. I said, well, what's the name of my primary care doctor? And they said, well, we don't know him. I said, put your supervisor on. They must know. So they put the supervisor on, supposedly. It could be anybody. They didn't know. I reported it to federal authorities when they said thank you, and they looked into it. This kind of stuff is costing Medicare millions of dollars. You don't need devices, but your doctor wanted you to have one, so you're gonna say, okay, I'll take one whether you need it or not.
Right.
And that's costing Medicare millions of dollars. There's so much of that stuff out there. How many people here have had calls offering you all kinds of goodies? And maybe I'm a target. I got one just this week. My wife's got one.
Did she?
We just received this. I don't know why they said it's a second notice. I didn't receive the first one.
Yeah, well, they hope to get your attention, right?
Second notice is always scary.
Exactly. Yeah, it's they're coming up with a variety of ways to.
I see the small print on the back there. It makes it really look illegal.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah, and they take that from some legitimate enterprise, but Strike It Rich X sweepstakes official rules. $10,000 weekly for 52 weeks with this number.
I'm in. Sign me
Yeah,
up.
exactly. You must call to verify you have received this letter and for inclusion into the group from which the winner will ultimately be chosen.
You know,
So you're thinking, this is
yeah,
great. I'm
that's
going to
cool.
get $10,000 for the next year. What do you need? Oh, we just need your bank account number and your social security number,
So we can
You
wire
know,
the funds.
so we can make it easy for you. You don't even have to go anywhere. The government operates.
We had somebody, Greg, in the senior center come to me, I think it was 6 months ago, during the summer,
Mhm.
that had this issue. Had a grandchild up in Canada going
Sure.
to school.
Yep.
And somehow they had that information and they were holding it for ransom.
Yeah. Yep.
And she was, really
Yeah. People.
concerned
Yep.
about it. Because they're very convincing.
Yep. And they have all your information. How would someone who's not legitimate have my daughter's name or my granddaughter's name and the place she's studying over in Europe and her friends' names. But your information is everywhere. And when in doubt, if you have a question, either a banking question or insurance question or something about a skimmer, we maintain a hotline. And I can provide this to you when I leave. It's 888-283-3757. We're a wealth of information. We maintain a website. If you're having some home improvement contracting work done, you can go online. You can determine if this individual has a valid registration, if in fact it's been suspended, or if he's been fined or she's been fined in the past. So there's a lot of information out there. CSLs are licensed through the Department of Public Safety. The HIC, Home Improvement Contractors, it's not a license, it's a registration. So it requires, most individuals who are doing work need both a CSL, which is a license, which requires training and schooling. Now, one thing we say to consumers is having an HIC registration doesn't guarantee that your contract is qualified to do the job. Any of us could go in, if we wanted to pay the annual registration or the biannual registration, to pay the one-time guarantee fund, can get a registration. What it does is it provides a level of protection to the consumer should they be aggrieved by the process. We also maintain a database with individuals that we have disciplined in the past. Many times you need both a CSL as well as an HIC registration.
Okay, as a follow-up to that
Yep.
is, we're talking legitimate contractors, or does that also include your local handyman then?
Yes, yep,
Okay.
yep, absolutely, yep.
And that registry list is available on your website?
It is.
If you have a credit card,
Yep.
check the bill. Just don't automatically look at what you have
Mhm.
to pay, because just recently, before my bill came in, Bank of America called me and said there's a $17 and some odd cent charge on your Bank of America credit card. I don't know that organization. Their security branch called me and they said, well, here's what we're going to do. You destroy the card you have and we'll send you a new one in a few days. And they did. And I give them credit for picking up
Yeah.
on that, you know.
Yep,
But how many of those get through?
right. My son and his wife were just out in California attending a wedding, and his wife is prone to bringing the checkbook, which in this day and age, I don't know why you bring a checkbook on a cross-country trip, but she did. And he got home, and $1,000 Amazon, $1,500 this. And this is looked into it. Turns out there was an employee working for this. It was a pretty upscale hotel. Had gone in, removed a check from the middle of the checkbook, took the routing number, the check, and was literally using his name to pay, with my son's information, to pay his rent. My son did some tracking and contacted the local police department out in California. And the detective said, well, there's not much we need to get. My son said, I know the guy's name. He went online, tracked this guy down, all the information. The detective said, I've never seen, you've made my investigation. They brought him in, the guy confessed to everything, the hotel reimbursed them. But it's just amazing, a simple thing like you think your information. So when you go to a hotel, they have safes. Put any type of personal information in there, lock it up.
If it wasn't successful, you wouldn't have all these scams going on. because,
Exactly. Well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate you all coming out.
Well, thank you, Greg. This has been a very informative session. I wish we could share this with all the seniors that come in.
Sure. Well, thanks again for having me, folks.
You.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it.